as a Power Rangers fan, it sucks. It sucks to be one right now because there's always going to be a certain type of group that will stop at nothing to bring others down for not liking certain things and everything. That's why I had to stop arguing with them, because if they want to believe the mumbo jumbo stuff or they want, let them. There's no saving their brains, you know what I'm saying? We can just say, yeah, whatever, and just go on by my life. But if I'm speaking facts about certain things that I know that it's happening, like this reboot, for example, there are those that will still stop at nothing to believe that this reboot is not going to happen. But I'm gonna get to all of that mid-video, so let's get to it, y'all.
Hey YouTube, Dawson Ryder here. In today's video, I wanted to talk about kind of the long-standing animosity towards Power Rangers from the hardcore Toku fans, mainly the Sentai fans. Almost kind of a long-standing war between Power Rangers and Sentai fans, but it's something that's definitely been around since I first got into it, since I got into the fandom, that has continued, is this kind of weird anger and looking down on Power Rangers, especially when one gets into Sentai or writer. I think there's like two main reasons for it. I think one, I guess three, because one I think is like a repeated pattern, which will be the first thing I talked about. But the second one I think is like the most common, and then I think the third reason is something more quasi-recent. Now the first reason is it's not unique to this fandom. I mean, I think the relationship between Power Rangers and Sentai and how one gets into that and views them is unique compared to other things, but it's also not too dissimilar from the comic fans that are, you know, throwing a tantrum whenever the movies change anything, or, you know, anime fans, the sub versus dub. Like Sentai versus PR is basically Toku's version of sub versus dub. It's very different, you know what I mean, because Power Rangers is its own thing. Some shows like Wild Force, Time Force stick closer to what Time Rangers or Gal Rangers stories, but other ones like Dino Thunder, RPM, it's not like an adaptation, but it's the same general premise is, oh, this is in Japanese, so I'm cool and mature for watching it because the dialogue doesn't sound as corny when you can't understand what they're saying without reading it. But it's that same thing. So like, that's not new. It's not like, oh, how did this phenomenon happen? Like, that's a common thing that happens. Every fandom has like an elitist culture to it. Now, I think the second reason comes down to, I think people might not want to admit it or see it, but I think there's this weird shame for still liking Power Rangers when you get older. So then you see Sentai, and because they can at times do...
I think I get comments like this all the time, especially when I go to Twitter. I see modern women complaining about men still watching cartoons and playing video games and stuff. But it ain't just modern women, but it be a lot of fake wannabe alpha males want to cry about men still watching cartoons and anime and playing video games, knowing that it's their way of escaping reality, or better yet, staying out of trouble, or keeping them out of trouble at that. And I've seen one post saying that the same way y'all put on makeup and you do OnlyFans. So you kind of expect that type of clapback from people that want to hate on you because they want to see you miserable because you living your life, you having fun, and you're not doing what those idiots on the internet in real life are doing, throwing your lives away for stupid stuff. You know what I'm saying? So, yeah, ain't nothing wrong with you liking Power Rangers and Super Sentai. The same reason why y'all watch, you know, Tyler Perry TV shows all the time. The same reason why y'all listen to K-pop. You love going to these Chris Brown concerts and all of that BS. You know what I'm saying? Don't shame others for something that they like when you shame us for something that we like. Like, do you see how I'm going with the double standard?
Things, especially in the older shows, that they will then see like, oh, this is a way I can like justify it. Like, oh, now I like the mature Japanese version that sometimes they get blood on their lip, or they stood next to beer once in Jetman, so basically this should be on HBO, so I'm cool for watching it. Sentai series that can go deeper than Power Rangers, and then you know, look down on it. I always felt that was the weird inverse, because like most people I've observed, that sounds like I study them, but like most people I've seen will watch it and be like, this is so much better, and like they do the I don't want to play with you anymore to Power Rangers, and and like, can't believe I never lived in Pawnee. I was always from Eagleton. Like, that's kind of the attitude that's taken on. Whereas like I was watching like Deca Ranger, and I appreciated SPD more, not in a way that I'm like Deca Ranger sucks, but I'm like, oh, I like what they did with SPD, where we kind of took this more largely episodic series and gave it a connected storyline with Grum and the A Squad, and then we had kind of more of a comic booky 50s sci-fi feel, whereas this felt more like a gritty police drama. You know, same thing watching Magi Ranger. I watched it and I appreciated Mystic Force more because Magi Ranger had this much more magical world, fairy-like feel, whereas Mystic Force had this medieval, like, Mystic Knights feel. So I was like this weird opposite where, like, as I watched the Sentai, there was some I definitely noticed, like, oh yeah, they could go deeper with this story compared to what Power Rangers will do with the maturity sometimes, but I also appreciated it more. And, you know, Sentai, I think, has gotten kiddier over time, too.
And here's the thing about Mystic Force, you know, I like some elements from that show the same way I like Operation Overdrive's elements, you know, being a treasure hunt and nature and everything, but everything else, including the god-awful Once a Ranger team up, but I feel like Adam was the only good part about that multi-parter, but everything else was complete garbage. And I did like that Mac was revealed to be an android and the little drama between him and his dad, even towards the end of the show. That was the only thing I like about the show, but everything else was just really, really terrible. So, the same reason why I love the rivalry between Nick and the Flores Knight. You know what I'm saying? I like their rivalries throughout the whole show. And do I hate the fact that it became a Nick show instead of everyone else? Yeah. But I did like the story of it, and I love the elements of it. That doesn't mean that I love Mystic Force altogether. You know, I think both Mystic Force and Operation Overdrive get a bad rep for being a mixed bag to some people, and I still feel the same way about it to this day, you know. But I feel like I said the Sentai were a lot better in my opinion because it's pretty much just a different story, you know. And I think that's about it. Do I like both Operation Overdrive and Mystic Force? Heck no. Do I like some elements from it? Yeah. You know, both seasons have its flaws, but that doesn't mean that I love them overall. You know, you can't just love every good or bad season. You gotta at least find one flaw in them. You can't just be delusional and accept anything. The same reason why a lot of modern women will smash anything as far as like getting intimate with any guy or any object that they see, and they'll thinking about it more sexually. That's the thing I hate about it the most, you know what I'm saying? People have gone too comfortable of accepting crap instead of seeing multiple red flags in them, you know? And another thing that he brought up before I continue on the video, I feel like Super Sentai back in the day was way more serious and mature for its time, because the stories have gotten really, really darker. If you watch the Showa era, nigga, the Showa era was peak Sentai. Especially the 80s. The 80s were some serious stuff. Yeah, there were some bad Sentai seasons and everything, but the story and some dark moments were the reason why 80s and 90s Sentai were peak. But I feel like Super Sentai and Kamen Rider shows nowadays have gotten way, way too cartoonish for the kiddos. I understand kids watching these days, but good God. At least make it more serious. I'm just saying.
Some of the recent series, it feels more babyish compared to back in the day. But I think there's that kind of aspect of like trying to legitimize it. And I think that it...
Nah, honestly, Zyuranger was pretty much the least favorite show on everyone's radar because it focused too much on the kid plot all the time. You barely focus on the Rangers and doing Ranger things and doing dark and mature storylines for the Rangers. But I feel like once the kids got too involved in the story, it becomes unwatchable.
It's funny paradoxical arguments where I've gotten in arguments with fans where they will argue a different point on the opposite end depending on what the argument's about. Like when I'm talking about Power Rangers, you know, Power Rangers and Sentai, people are like, oh, Sentai's so much more dark and mature and for adults, basically. And then when I'll say something like, I didn't like the Go Juju episode, it was too silly for me, they're like, it's supposed to be silly, it's a kid's show. You know, it's like, well, what is it? Is it for babies or should it be on HBO? Pick a lane, weebs. So I think that's kind of funny that I've seen the same fans make like opposing arguments of like, it's dark and mature and it's an adult show, and in a way. And then I've seen people say like, oh no, it's supposed to be for kids, don't take it so seriously. But I think a lot of that has to do with kind of the trying to legitimize it, make yourself feel better, which seems dumb. Like, I get it to a degree, especially with Power Rangers, because Power Rangers is viewed like, you know, in a weird way here. Like, if you're still into Pokemon at my age, you know, I'm sure there's still some people that are...
Don't even get me started on Pokemon, bro. Pokemon has been a thing since the ages. It's the cards. Everywhere you go on social media, you see people fighting over them cards. Walmart, Target, comic book shops, GameStop. You know, it's getting really ugly out here, bro. Pokemon cards are not really important. They're not that important. Your life is. I mean, I used to love Pokemon back in the day, back in the 2000s. The first time I watched the show was in 1997 when I got home from school at one point. I only watched one episode of Pokemon, but I couldn't really get into it. I've beaten the games, though, on the N64, but after that, I couldn't really get to the cards because I didn't really understand about the cards and nothing, though. Like, I didn't get it. I still don't get it. That, Yu-Gi-Oh!, Digimon, like, all them card games that I don't know. I couldn't get into it. And that's why you don't see me on video crashing out over a card when somebody wants that card that I'm getting, and then we're going to end up fighting about it. Like, no, I don't want to go to jail for that.
Oh, that's dumb or whatever. Can you believe if someone said that to me? That's dumb or whatever? I would cry for a week. You know what I mean? Like, there's still people that look down on nerds, but like, nerd culture has gotten much more mainstream, but most, you know, stuff like Pokemon, Digimon, anime, Star Wars, Marvel is like less looked down upon than Power Rangers, because it's viewed very much like lesser than, especially because people have memories of MMPR where they almost talked like they were on a pre-educational show. Whereas, like, even though Sentai is very much viewed as the same target age range, I think there's much more of a respect for it. Like, I think if you were to have a group of adults talking about, like, oh, hey, I watched Sentai when I was younger, you might have an adult... I can't say this for sure, but just the vibe I get from interviews from, like the executives and the actors and stuff, that, like, you might have a group of 20, 30-somethings catching up in Japan that would, like, say, like, oh, you watched Scout Ranger when you were growing up? I watched Hurricane or Rangers. I think that makes it worse, like, for us, where, like, I think there's a tendency...
I'll tell them the same reason why you do OnlyFans, because you put on makeup just to do a sex scene on video. You're a grown adult and you're doing OnlyFans when you have a kid at home and you're a mom. So instead of you criticizing me from watching anime and Power Rangers and stuff, why don't you look at yourself in the mirror and understand the red flags about yourself, especially if you're selling yourself for $5.99 on OnlyFans and you don't really consider that a red flag? So you might want to correct yourself when you're criticizing the person who enjoys the things that gets them out of trouble, and while you're over here selling yourself to be a miserable prick.
But I really watched the mature Japanese version, you know. But I think the other third reason is something that was born sort of recently out of the evolution of Power Rangers from Neo Saban till now, which obviously Neo Saban kind of took PR and devolved it, because it's always been a kid's show. But if you watch MMPR Season 1 through RPM, I've said this many times, you can see it slowly mature. Now, it wasn't like it was going to mature to eventually it's like, okay, all the way to RPM, and then you get to Breaking Bad, and then you're at Game of Thrones, and then it becomes Terrifier. Like, no. Like, eventually you're going to level out, and you're still going to want to be for kids. But it became more mature, and I'd say there's differences in the tone, but I would say, like, In Space through RPM are roughly the same tone, where it could be enjoyed by the original target audience, but then up to, like, middle schoolers. And obviously we can enjoy it, but I'm talking about, like, the age range for what they're targeting.
And honestly, between In Space and Time Force, those seasons are pretty much goated based on how mature it is because of the writing. And that's how you know kids are pretty much growing up. So you're going to have to make some changes. And that's why the reboot is going to be specifically for teenagers and adults that want a mature storyline that they've been asking for years. You know, because MEPR, I feel like it has some serious mature moments, you know, especially during 1994, and you recognize the matureness of it, you know, when they were trying to grow up a bit, but they still have some cheesy and camp to it at the same time, staying in the level of what Power Rangers really was and is today. But yeah, I would say MEPR is pretty much not perfect, but it's still iconic. The Greenwood Diva miniseries was way mature and darker at the same time. And after that, they just went back to being, you know, cheesy until the Green Cannon Part 1 multiple saga. That one is more mature when you think about it. But I feel like Time Force and In Space were very, very mature because of its story and because of its characters, of how well they were written, and it was emotional in times too. And RPM, I feel like they really cranked it up a notch, especially when it comes to a story. You know, it was way different. It was darker. It was grittier, and you love to see it. You know, but even though it was still aimed towards kids, but I think kids at that time, they were starting to growing up a bit. You kind of seen it. You know, they weren't just making it for just 5 to 6 year olds, because even then 5 or 6 year olds know about today's pop culture, so you don't really need to insult their intelligence like that all the time, like they're doing with the Neo Saban era. Wow.
Like, the storylines got more mature, and also people sometimes hate when I use that word because they go on that spectrum of like it's a kid show. And when I say mature, I'm not talking about like it's on HBO, but that just means the storytelling was more mature. Like, I did a ranking video recently where I used that word to describe one of the seasons, and they're like, Sentai's never supposed to be mature and for adults. I'm like, that's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying I prefer the series that are more emotionally mature. Like Avatar is like a series I would consider to be mature for kids compared to like Blue's Clues. I don't know. That was a side tangent. Where it was like, anyway, Neo Saban devolved it. You know, because like it was.
Here we go, y'all. The dark age of Power Rangers.
To a way that it was like inaccessible to like young kids. I don't think. I mean, RPM was a bit weird, but I don't think Jungle Fury is a series.
I disagree. RPM was goated. What are you talking about? RPM was not weird. Just so you know. But I will say what is weird is Samurai all the way up to Ninja Steel. That was pretty much one of the darkest days of Power Rangers, of being so bad it sucks, to the point where you want to just turn the channel or just stop watching Power Rangers altogether. You know, and when Samurai started back in 2011, you just knew it was gonna suck because of the actor and the writing team behind it. It was just not gonna be Power Rangers the way we grew up watching it. You know, they made it too kid friendly, you know. And listen, I don't mind them doing it for the kids or anything, but if you're gonna make a kids show, at least you could have done was just not talk down to the audiences. And they've been doing that ever since Samurai. But the seasons that have gotten way worse was Megaforce, both seasons of Megaforce, both seasons of Samurai, both seasons of Super Ninja Steel, and the second seasons of Dino Supercharged, where you know things have gotten really, really terrible because of its ending. You know. But I will say this though. The only thing good that came out of Ninja Steel Season 2 was the Dimensions of Danger team-up special, when Tommy was fighting a clone of himself. There's like an extended version of it that is way better than the one they aired on TV a while back. So I remember being excited about it, and I was streaming it until I got copyright claimed by Neo Saban and Hasbro at the time. So yeah, I'm not doing that anymore, showing it on screen just so they can copyright claim it, and then I have to take it down. And I have to chop up everything that is shown on screen. Like, I don't want to do that anymore. It's too much of a risk. But yeah, the only thing that came out of, yes, I'm sorry. The only thing good that came out of it was the Dimensions in Danger team up, and that was about it.
Dark or mature or complicated for like a 5-year-old. But anyway, they devolved it back to the weird talking down to like you're a weird Pleasantville character thing, almost to an even weirder degree. Like, I was on one of those like streaming 24-hour things the other day on Roku, just flipping through some of the channels, and I popped on the PR one for a few minutes, and they were talking about like homework, like, oh, glad we can get this homework done so we can donate to charity. I'm like, God, these guys,
yep.
like,
That's MMPR for you.
MMPR. But it was even weirder for Neo Saban. Anyway, I went on multiple tangents. Point is, we obviously had that de-evolution, so it further highlighted that Sentai more often than not was more mature and interesting than the PR version at the time, especially
Very
since a lot of people jumped on Sentai with Shinkenger, and there was extra scrutiny on Samurai for that reasoning. But then even more so, as we've entered this era where Hasbro wanted to phase out the traditional show, not helped that Sentai's canceled, so you're losing both of those traditions, and they're wanting to move it into more of a classic sort of modernized reboot like 2017 or similar, and there's pushback there with that idea. So like simultaneously you're losing the Tokusatsu feel and the regularity of the installments every year, and then you're having PR now becoming possibly a more mature westernized reboot, and then also having MMPR become the face of it, and then also the comics. And so I can kind of understand it. I don't think there's a need to be so like antagonistic towards Power Rangers, because it's more about the way the brand's being handled. So you don't need to be like antagonistic about the franchise itself, because I don't think we would have any level of the Western fandom we would have if it wasn't for Power Rangers. Like, I know there's some people in other parts of the world or that just somehow discovered Sentai, but like Power Rangers and that whole weird 90s boom, which is really kind of special when you think about it, doing Power Rangers and Masked Rider and Beetleborgs was really kind of a special thing that brought awareness to it.
And I gotta be honest with you, Boom Studios are pretty much doing anything different with Power Rangers comics, with the reboot and Power Rangers Unlimited series, with Trini leading the team. And there's multiple Rangers from different teams, from different seasons that are in the comics. So it's not just MEPR, where there's literally every single Ranger team from different seasons that are a part of this mature storyline. And if you do a good enough job of writing these characters down right, then you're gonna give us the best stories out of Boom Studios. You know what I'm saying? And I'll be honest with you, bruh, the 90s were pretty much where Power Rangers is at. It started off strong back in 1993, because you know I was 2 when the show came out on August 28th, so I didn't really become fully aware of the franchise until like the mid 90s and the early 2000s and stuff like that. So I was obsessed with MEPR. That was the only franchise that I was really into. That's why you couldn't see me draw other seasons, which I have in my other art channel. I've drawn other Power Rangers stuff all the time besides MEPR. Unless I wanted to redraw them, then I would. But after that, I would go draw other things. You know, it's not just about MEPR all the time, where you can literally just do other stories with different Rangers and from different seasons. Like, I remember a few years ago when I made a video on what if Boom Studios actually rebooted Power Rangers Megaforce, Ninja Steel, Samurai in the comic form, and give them an actual better storyline instead of keeping it, you know, traditional, and you can just do something different with them. You know, like give us an Asian Red Ranger in the Boom Studio comics, because if I worked for Boom Studios, I would definitely done it. I would have definitely give y'all an Asian Red Ranger with a Japanese last name, because you giving us a Caucasian white man with the Japanese last name is kind of stupid, you know what I'm saying? And that's why I've always said that the Neo Saban era will always be the dark age of Power Rangers. But getting back to the point I was making, the 90s were pretty much anything Tokusatsu for America. It wasn't just Power Rangers, it was Beetleborgs, VR Troopers, Mystic Knights, which is I find that show to be boring. Even the Masked Rider only had 1 season and it was not that great. But Beetleborgs, I feel like, are about to make a comeback, because 3 of the original actors are making their first appearance at Comic-Con, I think sometime on the 28th of August, which is something I'm looking forward to, and I'm gonna do a video of that after this. So yeah, I would say that if you're gonna reboot the Power Rangers, at least you could do is just make sure the story is well written for the audiences that grew up with it, not for the kiddos that are 5 or 6 years old and you're doing cheesy slapstick comedy that is not funny. You know, even Summer Bennett said himself, in order for us to move away from the cheesiness, we have to move away from the Super Sentai Japanese soccer footage in order to be original and tell its original story. You know, while continuing borrowing elements from Super Sentai, but make it more original. You get what I'm saying?
Now as the world gets smaller with the internet, it's easier to discover these things, but I think that it's kind of a blessing and a curse, because it did give this negative perception to Toku in a lot of ways, specifically anything that looks like PR, but also it opened the doors to it. It opened the doors to the fandom, and again, there's probably tons of franchises in Japan and stuff I don't even know about, so maybe we wouldn't even have simulcast writer in a Toku community without it. So I think it's silly to have such an animosity towards this thing that I think ultimately created a version of this community, which maybe I should have animosity towards it because it created my ultimate enemy, the Toku fandom. But like, I think it's turned on the show overall rather than just the state of it. Just look at the state of it. Like, I think for me, thinking about this video, it made me realize that the reason I don't get as upset about like, oh, the main show's ending and it might, like, I love the 2017 movie. Like, I think the 2017 movie and the comics are a key example where me discovering PR and then going along on my journey when I discovered Sentai and Rider, my interest diverged. Whereas I think a lot of the fandom, they stay on kind of like the Toku train of just like Sentai, Rider, PR, and they want it to all be Toku all the time, traditions and stuff. I also think there's a hard time fans have understanding that even though it's Western fans, like, it's weird to me how often the Sentai fans in the West talk like they're from Japan, Like, they're offended for them for whatever PR is doing. But anyway, like, that there's this lack of understanding that, like, you know, MMPR is the face of it, because that's often what we do here. We don't have a lot of major anthology franchises. Like, you have different Batmans and James Bonds, but it's always Batman, it's always James Bond. You know what I mean? There are little cases here and there. But
when you think about it, I think either Batman or Superman are pretty much the face of DC because they're both iconic heroes. So it's kind of hard to give the love of any other characters from DC Comics like The Flash, Green Arrow, Wonder Woman. You know, they're part of DC too, but I feel like Batman and Superman are pretty much the face of the franchise. The same with MMPR, where they're the face of Power Rangers. You know, you can't get mad at them for always using MMPR all the time because it makes money, you know what I'm saying, and it gives them bills to pay. You know, you can do that in the comics, but as far as like the reboot goes, it's gonna probably just be MMPR, but take elements from it though. But it depends on how they do it. But yeah, I agree as well.
we don't have many properties like that that's an anthology type of deal. I think we even showed that we struggled with that with Doctor Who, where once the Doctor stopped being young and hot and it was Peter Capaldi and stuff, people kind of fell off here, you know, compared to the phenomenon it was during 10.
And another thing, Doctor Who, I wasn't really into that franchise, so I'm glad I'm not a part of it.
But, like, it's like fans struggle to understand, like, well, I follow Sentai and Power Rangers every year where they change their face. Like, why can't the general public accept that? I think there's a lack of understanding there, but I got away from myself again. Thank God, I hate me. Anyway, point was, I think a lot of the fandom, this is where I differ with the fandom, is they stay on this train where PR, Sentai, and Writer are all part of, they just want it to be all Toku, whereas I think my interests diverged, where when I want to experience that Tokusatsu style and feel and aesthetic, I go off to this path and I can enjoy Sentai and Writer and Gavin or whatever else. But then with PR, it's not the Tokusatsu aspect I liked about it. I've always been a fan of the meaning of being a ranger. I think just feels different in that world because it changes meaning in Sentai, but also like the crazy shared universe. That's why I like the comics so much, because it takes advantage of that and makes it feel more like a comic book property, which a lot of fans don't like. And like, speaking of purism, I find it funny that the Power Rangers community has such a inverse attitude towards comics compared to like the Marvel DC fans that hold it up as like the Bible of like, you can't change the source material, and then you have the Tokusatsu community referring to the Power Rangers comics as fan fiction. That's crazy. Don't give fans that much credit to come up with that stuff. I think that's where we diverge, is like the stuff like.
And I think that's the main reasons why Power Rangers has always had the most annoying fan base of all time, because they think they know everything. They think they could just change everything this company has done over the years and make it better, but instead they just make things worse. Like, I'm not trying to be funny, but most of the fan films that I've seen are very, very cringe, and it just doesn't look that great, honestly. You know, that's just how I feel for the most part. Them singing the theme song is just cringeworthy. I'm sorry, I get cringe when fans do it. That's why I would rather just wait for the real thing to happen before I even, you know, get my thoughts on it. But that's besides the point. The comics, I feel, are way, way better because they're just original. They can create original Zords, Battleizers, and everything. And why do you think the Go-Go Power Rangers comic was really good? It's way better than the actual MBPR comic, because in that version, Billy created an armor that's pretty much like an Iron Man Power Ranger suit, but that can fly. It has all kinds of power-ups and everything. So that was pretty much a genius idea of that. So that's why I prefer the comics over the TV show.
Like, kind of taking advantage of that crazy world and making it feel more like a comic book world and less like a Tokusatsu world is what I want to see out of that. Same thing with 2017. And it's not about even making it mature. I didn't even think that movie was that dark. People talk about it like it was that James Vanderbeek fan.
The 2017 film was trash, and it will always forever be trash in my opinion. If you love that movie, more power to you, but for me, it was not Power Rangers to me. The reason why I said that is because they barely did anything Power Ranger-ish, as far as like morphing in action, use the Zords, well, not the Zords, but the toy morpher from the film, including the weapons. They barely used any of that fighting the putties, and they waited until the third act, almost 30 to 45 minutes for them to morph into action. They barely did any unmorphed fights with the putties. There's barely any martial arts in it. And not to mention, the Power Slash Ranger fan film was a joke. I didn't like it one bit. That's why I've always felt like it needed to be made for a Mortal Kombat project rather than the Power Rangers one. I didn't like that fan film one bit, and I still don't like it. Even, I think JDF said it at one point, and yet also St. John liked it for some odd reasons, but if he likes it, more power to him. But for me, I didn't like it. Thought it was strange, you know? But
girls over certain things in that. It's like crazy to me. Like I never saw that film as really dark. I mean, it was darker, but I don't think it's a dark movie. Like I don't know, but like that type of style, I would have been happy if that took off and became the face of Power Rangers. So it's like I think that I'm able to separate that, where I don't need Power Rangers to be like Sentai, you know, in style, because I can go watch any of the 50 Sentai seasons, and I can go watch Kamen Rider, and I can check out other toku, and I can get that interest there. Whereas with PR, I'm more interested in the comic booky world, or takes like the 2017 style, or seeing what a modernization is like, because I want to see that, because that's the type of thing I want to see out about PR. But also, I want people to see that this has potential. Like, on paper, the concept isn't any crazier than Talking Turtles or Trans about it, that they almost view it like right alongside Barney. So I think that this hate for Power Rangers comes from a lot of like people not wanting to admit they still like a kid show, and I think kind of like an anger over like the way it's evolved in recent years, where it's taken away that tradition of PR being a regular thing like Sentai, where it's a new season every year, and now it's becoming something like 2017, and like MMPR is the face of it. So like I understand the frustration, but I think like the vitriol and hate,
I don't want to stand in hatred. I think they just want things to stay the same. Like they're not really about that excitement for the Power Rangers reboot that a lot of us are. They just wanted to stay the same as far as like using Sentai footage, camp, cheesy, corny, can't be slapstick comedy that is not needed in the first place. You know, they wanted it to continue to adapt Super Sentai instead of just going all original. And I hope to God, whatever theme they're going to use, it's not just all powers. I want them to just use any kind of theme, animal, dinosaur, ninja, whatever. Just give us a theme for the reboot. Just don't make me crash out. So yeah, that's all I got for this video, man. Shout out to Dawson Ryder for this good video. Link to the original video will be in the description. I'm holla at y'all on my next one.